Доброго дня, шановні спікери, шановні гості, які прибувають у прес-залі, та глядачі, які дивляться нас онлайн.
Dear guests, dear spectators who watch us online, dear journalists, and it's time to start our presentation of the survey assessment of the situation with registration rating in Ukraine. We have Mr. Alexei Daragany, Yulia Korneyeva, Maxim Maximov, and Timur Mikhailov. All are representatives of the BRDO. I believe that this severe climate would mean the severe circumstances for the registration rating also, and registration rating, or maybe we should say the illegal takeovers or hostile mergers of companies, which here in Ukraine called the registration rating. It's a type of fraud, and this is quite massive in Ukraine, and that is we had to formulate a special policy to address the issue. And thus we had passed the roadmap to overcome registration rating, and currently we had carried out, and today we present a survey, a sort of monitoring of the situation, how we managed to implement this policy to overcome the systemic registration rating. And it also contains, the survey, it also contains the overview of the situation in business communities, and the attitude of those community to the situation with the registration rating, like an opposite to the official point of view. Thus, today we will discuss the biggest challenges, the results of our evaluation. We will describe the registration rating and how it could be measured. With this, I would like to give the floor to Yulia Korneyeva, who is our chief economist in BRDO, and she will explain how we can measure the harmful impact of the registration rating upon the economy. Thank you. I will start with the presentation. You might know that the rating in Ukraine is systemic, and this is a continuous threat to the development of private property institute, and the big place in rating is taken by corruption, because it creates favorable conditions for the raiders in Ukraine in the corruption perception index, and this slides prove that the situation with the raiding had been gradually improving, but Ukraine takes only 117 position out of 880 countries in this rating of the corruption perception index. And Ukraine is the only country in Europe which belongs to the mostly unfree countries according to this rating. And this is due to big problems in property protection at the legal level, that is the rule of law implementation. that as investors and private owners should be sure that the private property rights are defended, are protected, and when investment decisions are being made and suggests that in the developed countries like the US, Germany, France, when decisions are made by investors where to invest, the biggest attention is given to the issue about safety of investments and the rule of law and property rights protection. And thus, we clearly observe that only 450 million of 53 million of US dollars were invested in Ukraine in the latest period. And we tried to assess the confirmed cases of raiding, and we followed the Ministry of Justice decision, and we focused more in the raidings in the area of real estate property. And we found out that each month there was more than around 100 claims in raidings in the area of business registration, and almost 200 cases or complaints about raidings in the area of real estate property. And out of the 320 decisions taken by the Ministry of Justice Committee, we found that the average price, or average value, better to say, of the raiders' property was around 663,000 hryvnia each. And we came to conclusion that the general damage from the raidings amounts to 95 million hryvnia. And when the power and authorities remain indifferent to these cases, the total damage may amount to 1.1 billion hryvnia. And also we came to conclusion that the average period of review for each case takes between 176 days and 183 days. Well, this means the lost opportunities. This meant direct expenditures to rent new premises for offices, etc. And in result of all those calculations, we understood that limited access to the use of real estate may result for companies in 1.5 million losses per month, 18 millions per year. That is 13% of the overall turnover of the companies. And this only proves that this is a systemic and persistent problem which should be properly addressed. And now I will give the floor to Maximo, who will describe our methodology of the survey. I would like to start my part of the presentation from a short introduction why it is not easy to assess the scale of the ratings. In each specific case, you have to analyze the case and understand the legal context of the situation. And while in the years 2000, back in 1990s, the raiders used their own means to undertake raidings, but later the raidings registration became mainly the cases and fraud in course of registration. And by the way, the proofs about undertaken raiding against the company could be different among different state agencies. And the latest approach, which was used by the analysts, was based on the launched criminal proceedings against registration ratings, but this does not reflect the real situation, because not all the victims of the ratings would apply to court or would file a complaint to the Ministry of Justice. The second, the police departments have no well-established procedure how to tackle such investigations about registration ratings. Although this is investigated under Articles 205, 206 of the Criminal Code, or alternatively under Articles 187, 189 of the same Criminal Code, but those articles prescribe different procedures. Since we are describing the comprehensive assessment or evaluation, we suggest the following formula to measure it, which includes the assessment of the state body's performance efficiency, the assessment of the dynamics of rating spreads, and perception of registration ratings in society. And this introduces societal perception to this formula, and the index of this ratings barometer is carried out based on several factors. We understand that the statistical review of complaints submitted to the government may take more than 1 year, and the data which are published by governmental bodies, they are quite limited, and it is impossible to analyze the statistics of investigated cases based on quarterly periods is useless. And as I mentioned, not all the victims apply to the governmental bodies. And this brings us to a situation that ratings barometer could be measured, and this would be meaningful to do this measuring once a year. And now I suggest to look at the specific components of our methodology. The first is dynamics of the radar cases in Ukraine.
So this is a number of cases, and we have proper formula. We take total number of cases that were cancelled, and we divide them on the number of committed cases, and the overall number of registration actions should be corrected by 10% to reflect complaints where registration actions reasons were not connected with rating, and this will show the number of cases and the dynamics of rating. So this is about the efficiency of the work of state bodies in fighting against rating, and this is connected with the 3 state institutions where people addressed to. These are courts, police, and the board at the Ministry of Justice. The victims go to courts with cases concerning cancellation of registration actions, to police with complaints, and to the board also with complaints. And police investigate the cases concerning raiding in case of address to them. If we are speaking about how we are going to calculate the efficiency of courts in counteracting raiding, we believe that this inefficiencies show active cases where they do not have proper decisions, proper verdicts. In this case, we divide overall number of cases where courts provided a positive verdict, and we divide it to the number of cases that were considered by the courts of different jurisdictions. And we should take out some cases that have probability that the raiding was not committed in this case. The first category are the cases where the courts took decision to reject the case, and this means that the court identified that this case is not about raiding. The second category cases is the cases that were not considered in essence, so where they were brought back to the complaint, to the victim, and we may say that we cannot say whether there is raiding or not in these cases. And the result of this, we multiply by the coefficient, and I'm going to speak about this coefficient a little bit later. About efficiency of the board at the Ministry of Justice. Here, this is about the rejection of complaints and also complaints that were not considered in due time. So we should divide the number of complaints on overall number of cases that were provided to the board of the Ministry of Justice, and we should also take away those cases where the board identified lack of rating. So also we use here the corrective coefficient, and the first institution that is the matter of our analysis in the context of efficiency is national police. What is about inefficiency of the national police? The main function of this institution is investigation of crimes and respectively, at the same time, bringing to responsibility and identification of guilt is the function of the courts. So inefficiency concerning police, these are active cases that were not brought to court and there were not positive guilty verdicts. So we divided the number of cases for overall cases that were registered, criminal cases. And we also deduct those cases where there were positive verdicts and there was lack of guilt, no raid attacks. And also we should deduct those cases that were closed based on rehabilitative circumstances. For example, there was no violation in these cases. And the results that we get here, we should multiply for the corrective coefficient. About corrective coefficient, why we decided to introduce this coefficient, there are several reasons for this. First, in our opinion, analysis of quantity does not provide us with the full picture of efficiency of the state bodies, and we understand that we should identify the role of activity of the body in the whole system in counteracting raiding. So this coefficient that is multiplied, it consists of three components. First, the number of cases in this institution in relation to complaints to all state bodies, then duration of consideration, and the third one is assessment of efficiency, and we have 33% for each component, and they all equal 1, so 100%. And we make calculations based on statistical data, and the third component is based on expert survey that we held in the framework of preparation of Raid Barometer 2020. We asked experts who deal with protection of rights, with raid attacks. We asked 5 questions and we assessed 4 of them. These questions relate to parameters due to which expert community may assess efficiency of work of the bodies. This is about the results and the legality of decisions and impartiality, and whether the experts were ready to recommend the mechanisms of protection to others. So this is how our calculations look like concerning corrective coefficient. And the third component, we have the assessment of dynamics, assessment of efficiency by state bodies. And the third component is the perception of raiding in society, raid perception. This component is calculated simply, so public is surveyed concerning whether raiding increased, and positive are divided by negatives, and this index shows that the rating is the same actually. And if this coefficient is 1 and if this is bigger than 1, then it means that rating increased, and if this figure will be less than 1, it means that rating decreased to some percent in Ukraine. So this is how our efficiency of the state bodies look like. This is the first, the main formula. The first part is about efficiency of courts. The corrective coefficient is multiplied, and here the actions are done with the indicators of the activity of the board and national police, and we sum up these results and we get the number that get into four main categories: low efficiency, very low efficiency, medium efficiency, or high efficiency. So we went through the methodology that we propose in order to understand the state of registration rating in Ukraine. Now we focus on results of the survey, and this is the comparison between 2019 and 2020. In 2020, there was a small decrease of these violations, and cancellations increased during this time. And in 2020, this number increased to 46%, and it seems that the number of radar attacks increased in Ukraine, 40% increase. At the same time, we come to these conclusions with some consideration, because at the end of 2019, there was a change of approach of the board to the work with complaints, and for more than 2,000 complaints, they had less cancellations in consideration of cases based on formal grounds. As the result, they considered 2,000 cases more, and that's why more cancellations were identified during this year. If we're speaking about the efficiency of court system, we should say that in 2020, there was 57% drop of cases that were considered by the courts concerning cancellation of registration actions. It may be explained by the changes in legislation in 2019 and 2020, and also concerning the positions of the court. And 63% decrease of active court cases where the decision was not taken in essence. So in 2020, it means that courts were more efficient in counteracting raiding compared with 2019. About the board at the Ministry of Justice, it plays an important role in counteracting raiding. Out of 100% of cancellations, 92 were cancelled by the board. And I spoke about this before. In 2019, there were 2,222 cases that were cancelled, and in 2020 there were no such complaints accepted, and the board changed their approach to the work with the complaints. And about national police. During 2020, the number of criminal cases rose 2% that were provided to court with guilty verdict, and overall number increased 11%. The share of criminal cases that were not brought to court with indictment fell to 61% in 2020. This indicator is more than half of all criminal proceedings, and it means that the national police is inefficient in its work concerning registration raiding. The data that we got and the results that we got due to these calculations are interrelated with the assessment of efficiency of the state bodies that was provided by the experts. The courts got the highest score, more than 4.5 scores out of 5, and national police, based on survey, they got only 0.11. This is really low indicator. It shows mistrust of experts to this mechanism of protection of rights from this registration rating attacks. So this is how we identified this corrective coefficient, the number of complaints, the share of the complaints out of the number of those that were got by all the bodies, and the indicator of the assessment from the professional community. We carried out these calculations, and this coefficient for courts was 30%, for the board 60%, and for police 10%. And this confirms statistical indicators that the board brings the biggest contribution in counteracting registration rating in Ukraine, and the share of police is not significant. And the calculations of our components, when we use this corrective component and we multiply it by the results of those calculations that we've done previously, we get efficiency for all the bodies. For course 0 to 3, board 0. So on the whole, we get 0.55, and this means that efficiency of counteracting to registration rating of the state bodies is in the framework of medium efficiency. Now about perception of rating in society. To carry out this survey, we've used information technologies. We used Telegram, and we got results from the survey of the public. Half of surveyed believe that the situation with rating in 2020 improved. 1/3 believe that the situation became worse, and this is connected with the analysis of indicators, and it shows that the situation with rating in 2020 is better than the situation of 2019. The results, overall results of Rate Barometer 2020, they show that in the country we have the medium situation with the rating, and there are some problems, and the state body should pay more attention to this problem. This may show that the attacks increased, but also counteraction measures also increased during this time concerning registration rating. And the important role is played here by the courts and the board at the Ministry of Justice, as I've said. And that the public believe that in 2020 we have less rating in the country. That's why we may state that despite evident progress, registration rating was not overcome, and the state policy in state registration needs further correction and improvement. Summing up, I would like to say that Rate Barometer 2020 is in essence as a starting point to carry out such calculations in the future. This will allow us to efficiently understand the dynamics in accordance with all components of registration rating, to understand the dynamics of the radar attacks and what the state bodies' efficiency is and how the public opinion changes. Also, we've prepared the methodology, and it allows to scale up this survey in the regions and to study registration rating in different regions. That's why we propose to focus more on these two areas in order to continue our fight with rating. And we first should understand the conditions, the situation, and the dynamics of rating. Now, I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Timur Mikhailov.
Крім слова,
Would you please give me a clicker? I'm Timur Mikhailov. I'm a lawyer and advisor to the BRDO. As Alexei mentioned, some month ago, we presented a roadmap about prevention of registration ratings. Currently, we are promoting this document, and the rate barometer, which Alexei described, analyzes the data which the governmental bodies provide. And in result of that analysis, we found out that not all of those data are reliable. And that's why we decided to check some figures manually and to verify the indicators about risks, which we revealed at the stage of preparation of this very roadmap. And within several months, we had reviewed all the Ministry of Justice decisions and assessed them against potential risks for the ratings. And some cases became possible due to the negative impact of several risks when the risk of improper data protection is compiled with the inaction of complemented with the inaction of governmental bodies, etc. It is possible to register business or property based on the false documents. The inefficient method of complaining for the improper registration of property and the possibility to manipulate with the data in registers, etc. We suggested our own version of the risks matrix and suggested possible solutions. And on this slide, you see the four ways how this could be done. These are all different methods that could be implemented electronically, beginning with the foolproof approach or the what we call the electronic hand. So these are all conventional highlights for the electronic ways which could be applied in the registers to prevent doctoring of entries in those registers. The next way is to strengthen the appealing procedure or procedure of complaints and to make it more efficient. That is to change the practices of the Ministry of Justice. Professional, so to say, raiders, they know about loopholes in current procedures of the Ministry of Justice when it tackles with registrations of property and businesses, and they make a good use of it. Then other initiatives how to improve the administration of property registers and business registers, to create the electronic system of for notaries, to develop and introduce business process aimed at check of the documents, or verification of documents dated before 2013, then to harmonize the rules of document verifications and some others. As we mentioned, all our initiatives could be united in one anti-raiding law, and part of that law might be devoted to the land issues, or better to say, land property issues. Currently, it is possible to appropriate the community lands or public lands, which earlier were the community property, and now there is a wide space for the abuse of these procedures. So to improve the state registers, to integrate all the property registers, and to draft and to pass the law which will close the loopholes in existing legislation. That is what we wanted to present, and now we are ready to answer questions. There are some questions from the audience online. How do you think whether in 2021 the situation had improved with the ratings, and whether we can expect that the situation will at least slightly improve in 2022? In general, we observe that the situation with the specific components have been being improved. On the one hand, the government tries to do something and strengthen the measures. On the other hand, the cases of ratings are growing. And in general, we believe that we may predict that even if the police intensifies its efforts, even with the courts' activity and the proactivity would remain at the same level, the situation in the country would improve. In general, we have to strengthen preventive function, and we know such cases, and if we manage to increase the level of prevention, that this will improve the situation. Is it possible to collect more data for analysis, for processing and analysis, and how do you plan to tackle this issue? The limitation of data and insufficiency of data. This is one of the biggest restrictions for our survey. Our first objective was to analyze the situation with the ratings based on available data. But we found out that we can, despite all the shortcomings in that data, we cannot change this current situation with data collection. In order to change it for the better, we have to change the approach to data collection and spread it among the reporting agents. And here I should interfere and explain that electronically, when you collect or when you look at the electronic data, it is not so easy to understand who is the offender and who is the victim. And quite often the border between the between registration ratings and the corporate measures, which later on become part of the registration rating, is quite vague. And another big issue is with the rating perception component of our barometer, rate barometer. And in order to make it adequate, we have to carry out a broad public awareness campaign. I would encourage our audience in Zoom to ask their own questions. And now a new question, whether the state system is ready to the elimination of the State Registration Complaints Board, and what is envisaged in this area. The final objective should become as follows. The administrative complaining against unlawful registration rating should be existent, and the issue is not in the body itself or not in the procedure itself, but in the approach to this procedure, that it should be more streamlined and more straightforward. Even the survey which we have been presenting today, it has demonstrated that we cannot repeal the State Registration Complaints Board, because more than 92% of cancelled unlawful registration rating, they are done by this board. And by the way, due to those actions, the efficiency of the courts in this area had grown considerably. On the other hand, the courts are not able to tackle and review all the cases of complaints against registration ratings, which because they are quite numerous. I also have to add perhaps that as of now, as we are not ready to cancellation of the State Registration Complaints Board due to the low stages in implementation of the judiciary reform. The judiciary reform may take years and years before the judiciary system in this area, I mean registrations and ratings, would work perfectly enough to resolve this issue, because readers, they are quite familiar with the loopholes in legislation and usually make immediate use of them. I have found that there are some questions of our audience in Zoom.
Maybe there will be a question in English, we hope. Do we have a question? Should I read it? Будь ласка. Should I read it? Given the floor. Good afternoon, Irina Bernatska, Vice President of the Notary Chamber of Ukraine. Please tell us, we have two questions to you. We didn't hear your position from you, honorable guests, and from UCMC. And what will be the random hand that is submitted as an initiative to introduce it, and in what way do you see opportunity to interference of this random hand in the process of the registration of movable property, if in accordance with the law, state registrator himself takes this decision in the sphere of the registration of rights, and this interference of any bodies and officials and legal persons and other participants is prohibited? This is the first question. And the second one, about confirmation of some operations through the electronic cabinet by the owner. Did you consider this instrument as an innovation, as a novelty, that it can be used by raiders in some spheres to stop operations, to block operations? They may use it for fraud in course of operations. So we focus our attention to these factors because we believe that they may contain in themselves radar mechanisms. Let me start. This event is dedicated to the index, to rate barometer, and the initiatives on the roadmap were just mentioned here. This is an important issue. We may discuss it about double check. There is no initiative to interfere in the work of registers. This is an idea at the start of development, of its development. So this is like in the banking system, in payment system, in cadastre centers, in many Western countries, the operations in the registers. some operations concerning movable property, they cannot be done by one person. There is a principle, international principle. It is called two pairs of eyes, because it is more difficult to bribe two people than one person. So this is about risk management system, and this initiative, if it is supported by the expert community that you represent, and if it will be well thought through, so these risks operations that will be automatically identified by the system, they will go for confirmation for another registrator. So no state bodies should interfere in registration operations. If there is dual confirmation, then this operation will be done further automatically. This is the answer to your first question. Now the answer to the second one. Maybe Timur will add something. Thank you. Thank you. I would like to state that we understand that some people may abuse these things. That's why we provide proper safeguards. We propose the mechanisms in order to prevent such situations. The implementation of these initiatives need changes to the legislation. Now the legislation states that the registrator takes decisions by himself, but if in the Verkhovna Rada we have consensus, we may change this. And once again, we repeat that these initiatives, they need a pilot project. We provide advocacy, we provide discussions. We believe that this may be done carefully, looking at what we are going to have with monitoring of results. Second question about electronic cabinet, about confirmation of the owner in his electronic cabinet of the operation with the property. It should be done with the operations that need his will. This is not about blocking of transition of property rights, for example, based on court decisions. So the scope of abuse, potential abuse, is annihilated in these cases. Once again, I would like to add that this initiative needs a pilot, and presenting the roadmap, we directly said that this is just partly for discussion. We do not actually promote this idea, but we should first find consensus in these matters. And we should do our home task first in order to agree these issues among the stakeholders that are involved in the process. Thank you. We do not have any further questions, and now I propose to sign up. I would like to say several words. First, this survey and preparation of the roadmap concerning counteracting raiding that was presented a month ago and that we updated now is due to support of the European Union and the World Bank project. We would like to thank them because we need proper partners in fighting raiding. We would like to thank them all. And I would like to say that the country will win due to the systemic studying of raiding. And we have teams who are working with counteracting raiding, and there is enough work for everyone. And the initiatives that we introduced in 2019, the order on counteracting raiding and the order of the president, and the actions that we see within the Ministry of Justice, they provide proper results, and this result should be developed further. And we would like that red barometer would show us positive things. One more question appeared. I would like to read them. Two questions, actually. Do you believe that we need to protect entry to the registers? And do you believe that if these cancellations concerning the activity of the board, so this is really complicated matter that is in this question. About registers, in many registers, there is multi-factor identification access, and this produced a significant effect, and entry to the register is better protected. There is less abuse, less hacker attacks. Nevertheless, we have information about separate events, but this is just a different situation. Before 2020, we had many information about such events. Now we have better protection that was introduced, and we should work on this more, of course. About the second question, the transition of any responsibility creates risks. That's why we believe, yes, there are risks concerning this, but we envisage a lot of safeguards in order to mitigate those risks. I believe Timur is going to add. Once again, thank you. I would like to say that we are now holding a discussion about legislation. And if deputies decide that these obligations can be transferred, this may be done. This is first. This is not about violations of legislation or abuse. So we should write it down. I mean, legislators should do this. They should provide proper grounds. About the appeal concerning the chain of registration, this may be done concerning the actions that were done during 1 month after the first instance of abuse. So we should implement the decisions of the Ministry of Justice. We should counteract professional raiding, and we should prevent these raiding schemes concerning rights of property, and we believe that this balance is possible, but this is a matter for further discussions. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.